Okay, so in our last video, we got very involved with this idea of choreography. When I was in graduate school, how many years ago was that? 2003, I was entering graduate school. Was that a long time ago? It was 15 years ago. And we were very interested in web services. This is before clouds began to make a big impact. We weren't calling them clouds, we were calling them grids. But web services was making an impact because we were able to basically build websites, but then grab data from different corners of the internet to compose. And so you were getting software as a service that was beginning to, really enter into people's consciousness. But still, web hosting and clouds weren't readily available to people. So not a lot of startups had very good back-end services. But as of 2007, roughly upon my graduation, the Amazon Web Services revolution kicked off and became really the way that we did things. So in many ways, the cloud in 2007 is kind of where you guys are at in 2018, with serverless, where that utility is out there. A few people are using them, but it's not a paradigm yet. It's not what everybody is doing. People are still really holding on to old tools. And the problem is PHP, highly hackable. Ruby on Rails, highly hackable. Node.js, vulnerable. I'm not saying that, serverless is invulnerable, but it's so much better, so much faster, and so much cheaper that in many ways there is no successful argument for more traditional tools. So it's the end of those traditional tools, but that's hard for people to reckon with. For me to tell a career, 20-year veteran PHPer, I can do it better than you, that's not appropriate. That's just awful. And in many ways, I just need to put out my products and then race it against others. Does that make sense? I don't like to cast shade upon other ways of doing things because it's just, people are, they're inured to the way that they do things. If somebody said, okay, Steph, host, put up, stand up a world-class PHP service, I'd say, well, I'm a serverless guy. That's what I know. That's what I put out there. And I could maybe study but I would hate it because I have my own personal sales pitch for serverless. And it works the same way with other brands, other ways of building for the internet. So serverless is here, but I also think serverless is a great way to get started with web dev because there are very few technical hangups. There are a few pieces of technology that you do need to know, and they include the Facebook piece, the Amazon piece, the Dynamo, the IAM, and the S3 piece. And I want to go through each of those separate pieces. Now let me say this. These are the pieces that you have to know at this point to stand up a website and get it working. It will be a lot easier than web dev has been in the past, but if you run into problems, you need to localize the source of that problem and begin to hammer away at that problem. No single one of these services are particularly difficult, but if you ignore one detail within any one of these services, the whole thing will not work. So you actually need to be perfect as it pertains to each of these pieces. So as we move through it, you'll realize that there's 4 or 5 facts that you need to know about each one of these services. And you need to conceptually understand this choreography in order to make it happen in the real world. And let me just say as a side note, theory within IT is more valuable than theory within, say, management or psychology or ecology or any other science, because science and technology are very, very different. Science is about observing and developing a theory as to why natural phenomena work. So science gets better over time. Technology is inherently artificial. There's nothing that we don't know here because we had control over the elements from the get-go. And the only thing that we don't know is under what conditions will it malfunction? Under what conditions will the Prius go autonomous and lose? When will we lose control over the Prius? When will the Tesla break down? Those are the things we do not know. So we apply scientific method to study the outcomes of deployment, but in fact, we know how things work. So when you do technology, you need to know that theory first, and then you use your technical skills to put things together. But you cannot just hack things. The theory is the reason why things work the way they do. So you must master theory first, then you can put out. That will make sense. It's like music. So let's go. I think the S3 part is something that you know quite well, and we've gone over the HTML and the JavaScript. We're going to zero back to HTML and JavaScript a little bit later, but we have less to talk about this at this stage in the game. Now, those of you who are watching for the first time this video, you're going to need to go back into our Unit 1 and know how to get an Amazon account, know how to do S3, know how to upload what that cycle is. It's very easy, and we're not going to go over that again right here. I'd like to jump in and firstly take a look at our source code. And by going into and this is going to be the core of our example. It's called query core. Can you in the back, can you all see this all right? Okay. Normally if they can see it well, then the internet can see it well too. And you should full screen this to get the full experience. You can see the HTML entities falling into place here, but you can see that inside of our example, we're going to have two new pieces of code. One is going to be Amazon's SDK, or Software Development Kit, for JavaScript, or their JS SDK, and then the other is Facebook's Developer Kit, or Facebook's JavaScript SDK. Eventually, we're going to be using Amazon objects, and then we're also going to be using Facebook objects. And so when you think about the way that this choreography works, the Facebook SDK is going to be used in order to provide authentication. Once the authentication is certified, your browser will receive an open authentication token. That token will be passed to the Amazon SDK, and then that SDK will be used to communicate back with the Amazon cloud. But you will configure IAM to respect the Facebook token. Okay, so these pieces will fit together nicely, and then this Dynamo, which is ultimately our flag, it's our resource, will become available to your HTML so long as Facebook security is passed and Amazon security is satisfied with your Facebook authentication. Okay, so already right off the bat, our stuff is way more secure than other stuff. It's going to be very hard to take apart our website. And let me say this. If you can guarantee a security baseline very early in the project, you've put the project off into a dramatically successful trajectory. If you cannot resolve security issues early, you will always have security issues. And so the project will be in doubt until those security issues are resolved. The problem with security is that if you make a successful public-facing site, your general liability increases with the success of the site. If there are holes, the holes become more bigger sources of liability the more people experience it. So you actually are doing much better risk management by handling security right at the get-go, which is precisely what we're doing right now. Okay, so these two SDKs are quite important. Now, the first place I'm going to go in order to get things moving is to developers.facebook.com. And I'm going to log in using my existing Facebook credentials. And within this, I'm going to create a new app. And unfortunately, add a new app. And this is going to call my Winter 18 app example. That's going to be my contact email. create app ID. Hopefully it's doing that. Okay. Now, the app ID is all important. And eventually, we're going to utilize the app ID at the very beginning of our JavaScript. And that app ID will become visible to the rest of the internet. So there's nothing particularly secret about that app ID. But Facebook will only authenticate you in regards to that app ID, and Amazon needs to know that app ID later as well. Now, the part of Facebook we're going to use is called Facebook Login. So we're going to set that up. Now, if you want to code for iOS or Android, great. We're going to code for the web. Now, the URL of my site has everything to do with my S3, right? And so let's call this file query core. And so that URL is what I need to copy. Maybe I can say copy that link when I build up. Now, this is going to be the place where you will put your login to Facebook. Facebook only gives you one login per website. And so what you're going to do is you're going to have a hard login at one place inside of your website. So you give Facebook that URL. And in theory, that's good because Facebook says, great, I will accept login requests from this source. Now, this code, you can take stock of it, but we're actually going to use it later. And so I can kind of next my way through this. And tell us about your website. That's fine. All this is basically done. Login status, Facebook next steps. So I want to go back to my dashboard. And this app ID is what I need to supply to my source code. So I'm going to be copying that, and I'm going to be putting that right here. So let's do that right away. And so I want to go into my web builder. And I'm going to lay that in. Oops. Copy that. Boom, boom. Now, the next thing that's important to me is getting a security configured within Amazon. And there's a few steps that I need to build up to that. And that's going to be what's called IAM. But I can configure IAM right now because I have a Facebook app ID. Now, IAM stands for Identity and Access Management. Sorry to be moving around between these. But I can go back to my Amazon, and I go into the section called IAM. Now, I have already accessed IAM. And if you've not used it before, it's just fine. You're going to find it under Security, Identity, and Compliance. Your page is going to look a little bit like this or like this. My page is going to be, I'm on an LCD, so my page looks a little different. You're going to scroll down to IAM, and you're going to go into the IAM piece. Now, you need two things to make IAM work. You need policies, and you need a role. And so these are the various roles that I have that I've built for, different apps and different classes. And they're not showing up very well because of the screen. But this is a ARN that I've customized for us with our Winter 18 example policy. And you can just see from the outset, you have what's called an Amazon resource name, or an ARN. And that ARN is what we're going to fit into our code right here. So what I want to do is I want to speed forward into the database piece. And I want to say that I'm going to make the database, and then I'm going to secure the database using my Facebook app ID. So I'm going to go on into the database part with the understanding that I'm going to come back to IAM later and configure security for it. Now I go to DynamoDB a lot, so it's right up there. But you all can go down here to Database, DynamoDB. And let's talk a little bit about how the database works. Let's create a table. Now the table can have any number of names, but you actually need to pay attention to the data center where you're operating in order to get your code to run. Amazon runs all over the world, and so the endpoints that I recommend that you use, I recommend that you use either US East, North Virginia, or the Ohio, or the US West and Oregon. I don't recommend that you use Northern California. It costs 3 times more to do everything in Northern California. Okay, that's Silicon Valley. They're going to charge you 3 times what it will cost you to run it in Oregon. So Oregon, you can see that's selected over here. So it means that when I make this table, it's going to be within the US West data center. Now, if you get that wrong and you make your database in Singapore, that's fine. But you need to sort of remember where you put the data, where in the world you put your database, which is kind of fun. Some of you, a lot of you are, look, you can make it in Seoul, make it in Australia, make it in Japan, make it in Paris, make it in Brazil. It's pretty exciting. This is a big reason why Netflix can deploy in 180 countries. And when you go into your Netflix, you see films that are in different languages. Like you see fresh content built for Asian audiences. You see fresh content that is for a Spanish-speaking global audience. And you're like, well, I don't speak Spanish, but they're making fresh content for Spanish audiences. That's pretty exciting. They're also making content for European audiences, right? You're going to see, frankly, I believe that you can only see a portion of the Netflix world. But their content generation is for a multilingual, multi-country audience. And when Netflix is using AWS, they're pushing content, copies their content all over the world. Does that make sense? Very exciting. But really, AWS is what enables Netflix to build that kind of a business. I mean, if Netflix were to deploy new content in Singapore that's meant for that South Asian, archipelago, right? That tropical Asian audience, that means that they can build a whole Hollywood around Singapore, around South Asia. They can build, dozens of movies for the Portuguese world, for Brazil, right? They can build dozens of movies for the Koreans. So when you see fresh content that's not necessarily built for your nationality, that's because Netflix is trying to touch 180 countries, and it's using the same server system that you are. Okay, so just to stoke your ego a little bit. Okay, table name is going to be whatever you want it to be. My table. And then I want to say this, and this is what we need to go over. Inside of any given table, inside of DynamoDB, you have what's called a primary key, but you actually need 2 different columns to make a primary key. You have a key that's called the partition key, which you can call a partition key. And then you have a sort key, which I recommend that you call sort key, just off the bat. Now, you all are used to MySQL and relational databases. That's the best possible education you could have going into something like this. NoSQL databases are different in that they're not based upon any single disk. NoSQL databases want to be able to take a row of data and put them anywhere where there's room for it in the cloud. The cloud is just a big distribution environment. So that means that your table can distribute its content across a multitude of servers, which is a radical concept because MySQL likes to use a local single disk. So when Facebook first went online, they didn't have Amazon Web Services in 2004, right? So they actually had to learn how to scale MySQL. So by about 2008, I heard a lecture from a Facebook engineer, wonderful guy, who said that, roughly Facebook by 2008 had 1,200 MySQL instances running to support the growing user base. It was growing by millions of people every day. But frankly, they were not querying MySQL. They were using a cache layer called Memcache in order to store data. So what people would actually touch when they use Facebook was not MySQL content. It was stuff that was mined out of MySQL, placed in Memcache, put in memory so that it would access quickly. DynamoDB has some of those attributes where A, it's queryable, but B, it has indexes that are easily accessed. But let me just say this. When you're making a table inside of DynamoDB, you actually need to have a partition key and a sort key. And when you put them both together, that creates a unique row. Okay, so let's do that initially. We'll have a partition key and a sort key. Now, ultimately, when we query, we're going to run a query operation. We're going to query based on the item ID, which is going to be the primary key that we're using, and that we're going to use a column called sort key in order to make this work. So just for neatness, I'm going to create a partition key called item ID, and I'm going to add a sort key called sort key. Now, just to get our example working, we may end up going without the sort key, and we may just make a column called sort key. It won't be a real sort key, but we may add that later just to debug it. And so let's create it. And we can refresh. Oh, great, that's ready. Here is my paradigm table. This is my example table. And I ended up making a sort key and an item ID. I'm going to remake that here with my table. So we're going to do the same thing right here. We're going to have an item ID and a sort key. And you have the ability to put some items into that table. And so I'm going to create an item. And we're going to create an item ID of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Then a sort key that says, hi. Now you can see me. And I can save that. And I have items in this table. Now, in the future, guys, we're going to teach you how to put data in, how to delete data, how to update data, how to really do all those operations. That's going to come in about a week or two once you're used to this. Now, I want you to just freely go in there, create 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 new items in your table just by typing it in there. Now, we can have the same item ID across items. Those can, doesn't want that. I can actually create an item ID with the same data in it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And those will add up just fine. And what they do is, this table will allow you to have duplicates between the rows in any given column. But when you put together the partition key and the sort key, that combination has to be unique. And the reason why is we're going to sort the table based on what's in sort key, and then we're going to partition or organize and index the information based on its partition key. And this goes back to some relational theory, which really has to do with how do we organize and make a database easy to sort and query. And so we can go back to that, but I just want to emphasize this is the way that your stuff should be looking right now. You should have a primary partition key called item ID and a primary sort key whose name is sort key, and you're ready to move on. Now we're going to go into the access control, and we're going to tell Amazon that we're using Facebook as our security environment. And what we're going to do is we're going to choose the ability to delete, get, put, query, and update. And we're going to create a policy right here based on that. I'm going to select that. So I'm going to press Control C or Apple C. And the reason why I'm going fast here is I think that you guys are going to master this pretty quickly. But the only thing that you need to keep in mind is probably you're going to try to do this several different times. You're going to make a couple of different tables and make a couple of different app IDs and make a couple of policies and make a couple of roles. And my recommendation is don't do that. Always just try to have one table and one app ID and one role and one policy. And the real trick is coordinating the choreography between these services. But when you have like 4 different tables, sometimes it's easy to it's hard to keep it all in order. So don't keep creating new ones. Just adjust the same ones you have. Just a little advice. So that is my table. Now, the next thing I do is I'm going to go into IAM. And I'm going to make sure that I have this policy copy pasted. I'm going to go into IAM, and this is going to be, you're going to need to watch this a few times, but I'm going to create a policy, and I'm going to use JSON. I'm going to erase what's in there, and I'm going to paste in what I just had in my Dynamo, and it didn't save. Let's go in my Dynamo. Don't need the batches. Create the policy. And I think it's because I'm going to copy that. I'm going to create a policy that's just based upon I think my page is having difficulty rendering. That's great. So you can see that the policy that I just made inside of Dynamo is now, I'm going to put it into my my IAM. And this will take some practice, guys, so just bear with me. But what you want to do is you want to erase this condition part. And so you kind of need to go through here and find the right combination. I'm afraid my screen is beginning to crash on me, so that's how that goes. Nope, not doing well. What I'm really looking for is it highlights. See how it highlights those brackets? That's quite important to me. That stays together because I need to edit out this part right here. That's tricky. That's surgical. And so I can review the policy and it will say, did you format it well? And if you miss a character or something, it'll say, hey, it doesn't quite look right, fix this. And we'll go through that. But I'm going to call this my winter 2018. I'm going to call this my table 2018. I need to kind of remember the name of it. Which is hard for me, not great at that. But you can see if I just query based on winter, that's going to be the the policy that I just made. But what you need to just keep in mind is you say, well, I made a database and I made a table within this database, and that policy controls the read, write, update, delete, query operations to that table. So it's pretty valuable. So now I'm going to make a role, and a role is just a way to bundle a multitude of policies. And we're going to use the AWS, the web identity. And the identity provider is going to be Facebook. And I just need to grab my app ID again from Facebook. So you're beginning to get a feeling of how these knit together. And that's my identity provider. And let's see, my page is just doing all the best I can, but you know. Nope, I don't need those conditions.
You just press create.
No. The button that I need is not rendering, or is it? Is it there? Is it not there? So I'd like to show you how to do this. I think you're getting the idea. What I'm going to do instead, I'm just going to show you inside of my class. But in creating a role, that's all you need in order to create the role. Now I have a multitude of roles that are already ready to work right here. I think it's just Amazon's page is not, you can see that it's not really rendering right for our projector. Yeah, it's not really going to work. So I'm going to grab this role that I already have. This CSU 311 role. Oh, this is just awful. I can't, it's fine. I don't know if you can see that. And you're going to see that I've already made this policy. And you can see that this policy trusts that app ID, which is the trust relationship that I want to set up. And in terms of the permissions, what I want to do is I want to attach a policy. I want to attach that winter 2018 policy that we were just talking about. So now that role will very successfully execute that policy. And so now that that's there, I just want to go ahead and grab that ARN. Got to have nerves of steel. And now we are ready to rumble. Now inside of this example, the only thing I need to change is I need to make my table here. And now item ID is going to be present within the S3 database, or the Dynamo database rather, sorry. Item ID is going to be available to me in sort key, and there's going to be data there right now. So why don't we just upload this in a sec. So the game here is I want to query for all the rows that have that value in it and grab the sort key from all the rows that have this available, and then place that sort key value inside of the output div right up top here. So in order to get the test to run, let me just make sure that I have a row that has that very same, hi, this is the row. And I want to say test working. You know, it's a big deal when you get your prototype working. And so I want to be able to see the sort key from that row. So what I'm going to do right now for my first run is I can see I'm running down the clock here. And if I have any errors, I'll come back in a second video and fix them for you. Can you just close the door for me so we don't get the extra room, the extra noise? And then I want to upload this query core that I've been working with right here to S3. So now that I've done this work right here, so I'm going to go on back to S3, and I'm going to upload query core to the bucket where I want it to be. So let's add those files. So I want to check and see if that's the one that I've updated. And we're just going to take a chance on it. I think you understand the general throughput. And if we have some errors, then we'll just come back and fix it. And I'll show you. It's almost better to show you the errors if you got any. And so we'll go grant read on it because it's going to be public. We're sitting in a web server. And we can kind of next our way through it. Go ahead, go for the upload. And so query core is going to be there, and now it's just brand new. And so let's trigger it and let's see where we're at. Now I like to open up my inspect element as I go and look at the console. You can see it's loading pretty well. First button, I'm going to click it, and because I'm already talking back to Facebook, it's going to ask me to authenticate. And I've already logged into Facebook. You can see that I'm already sort of logged in a minute ago, and so it'll say continue as Stefan. Let me just show off a little bit by logging out of Facebook, because this is the way that you'll sort of experience it. And let's reload that, and let's log in, and it's going to say hi, log in for the first. So this is going to look and feel like a lot of professional web development experiences you've seen out there. You're going to log in, and it wants to get permission to kind of tap into the information in my Facebook account. Once that's happening, I wouldn't mind logging in again just to make sure that I'm in. I'm already connected, good to go. Let's query it, and let's see if we can nail it. Now, we nailed it. Remember, this is, you see, this is very similar to the example that we looked at a few minutes ago, where we did the validation test. It's very similar to it. Where what we want to do is we want to grab the output and grab the sort key from the database, which is what we did. And then this is the row that we put inside of the database. So what we have is we have a fully secured authenticated data flow moving back and forth using Facebook, Amazon, and DynamoDB and IAM. Now, we nailed it on the first try. We're kind of lucky. For the beginner, it's not going to be that easy. Does that mean you got to repeat? But at least you're going to be secure right at the genesis of the project. Now, let me just confirm this success for you, and then we'll move on. But this is the content of the row. and we'll let you cruise. But here's the content from within the database. Here's my table, and here's the items that you made there. The test working. Hi, this is the row. And so we got that to appear. It's kind of good to go back and review that. Query core, cool. And let's make that open in a separate. And so we have the inspect element open. Login is good to go. We're already connected. Try the query. Getting it back. You notice how quickly that's moving? We're in California. It's touching Oregon, and it's coming back to us. That's really fast. I mean, I think this is a good reason to go serverless, and we have to log in before we do that. But that's a very fast access going to Oregon and back. It might be fun for you guys to set up a table in Ohio or Virginia and see just how fast your code executes. And that's about 6 times faster than the average web framework. So anyhow, I'll let you go. Thank you for your attention. Good first day. We got it done. See you next time.